All right, everyone. So you should have on your flash drive your copy of the work, either copied from my network folder or your copy of it, and you will open up the Visual Studio SLN file. Your project is not complete if you don't have that SLN file in there somewhere. So go ahead and open up that file in Visual Studio. You'll have your copy of the work. You'll have the Solution Explorer on the right and the project www. Okay, so our idea is we have this project that we started last month that we need to bring into the project of this month. On Tuesday, we created the CBDB project here in Visual Studio. That is now, we're going to continue with it. So I've got, just to get the idea, in my flash drive and on the Z drive, I've got 0 CBDB start. That's the project, the ending result of the project from last month, my copy of it. Probably you want to use your copy of it from last month because you've got your fonts and the text that you wrote on the home page and all of that. Yours is probably better than this one. But if you need a starting point, 0 CBDB from last month is a complete project. So what we need to do is integrate some things from CBDB of last month into CBDB of this month. We can sort of just drag and drop things in, except for, very importantly, the index file. There is an index file from last month's project, and there's one on this month's project. So we're going to drop everything together in a moment, but we need to do this. Let's temporarily rename the index.html file in the CBDB of this month, in the Visual Studio version. Let's rename it, just like put number 2 on it or something. If we don't rename it and copy files over, our index file from last month most likely will overwrite and erase this index file. So here in Visual Studio, just right-click and rename it. You'll think about it for a moment because it's got a lot of files connected to it, I guess. And we're going to do some cleanup about it, but we need to simply then drop in these files. We've got the custom JavaScript file, the custom CSS file. We're going to eventually put that code in the appropriate one that already exists. And then you've got the my colors and the jQuery and all of that. So short answer, and then we'll clean it up. Just drop all of the files except the images folder into the www folder of Visual Studio. And obviously there's a couple of ways to do this. But for the moment I'm bringing in all of the files from last month into this month. Then inside of the images folder from last month, we need all of those files. So you don't need to copy the whole images folder, but the stuff in the images folder from last month, copy them into the images folder of this month. And you should simply be able to drag and drop from one folder into your Visual Studio folders. Yes? I have to check the calendar, but let me confirm.
Well, 928 was it last time, right?
So on your own copy of it from last month, it must have been 9/28. That was our last day of class last month. Okay, so in my CBDB project Visual Studio, I dropped in everything. There's the custom CSS, custom JavaScript. There's the theme color. There's the jQuery and jQuery mobile stuff. There's the index from last month. There's the index from this month. There's my font. And then in the images folder, I dropped in all of the jQuery mobile supporting files. Let's pause there, and then we will continue to integrate it properly. Did everyone get those files into the project? Need a little help there?
That's what's currently.
All right, so I put in all of those pieces from last month into this month, and then what we need to do is tie up some loose ends in a moment. Put it right on top of that. You need all of that. That's what's, there's my theme and custom code. So yeah, you need to put it on stuff. All right, so I've got, from last month, we wrote a little bit of custom CSS code in the my CSS file. I'm going to need to transfer what's inside of this into the only CSS file that the project will care about, which is in the CSS folder. So you see in the CSS folder, there's an index CSS. The default Visual Studio project creates an index file, which is temporarily indexed to, and that index connects to an index CSS and an index JS. So we need to take our old CSS code, copy and paste it into the new CSS file. So you can double-click my CSS.css. All of this code that is here, you're going to select it and copy it. And then open up index CSS in the CSS folder. And we can paste it at the end. So if you'd like, you can view two windows at once by right-clicking the tab and selecting tab groups. Right-click, new vertical tab. So if you want to see two files at once, from my CSS, I copied everything, and I pasted it at the end of index CSS. So index CSS is the one we're going to keep, and my CSS, we're going to delete it. We don't need two different CSS files hanging around. We could use them both, I suppose, but more efficient just to have one. We'll do the same thing with JavaScript in a moment. We don't need two separate JavaScript files with custom code. We'll integrate those in a moment. So the my CSS, I can close that, and then on the index CSS, I'll save it and close it.
So we can delete the my CSS.
Yeah, we're going to do that in a moment. So that's exactly what we'll do in a moment. So after we copy over the my CSS code into index CSS, we can delete my CSS because now it's redundant. Nothing is really connecting to it that matters. It's code that we've already copied into the file that we need to keep. So once we've confirmed that you've moved the code, copy, paste, whatever, cut and paste, whatever, once you copy the code from my CSS into index CSS, you can delete my CSS.
If you don't have delete as an option, is there something that you're going to turn on to enable that? Just
It could be, if your project is currently still running, click the little red stop button. You're in debug mode, so stop debugging, and then you should have that feature.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Make sure that's not
So I will delete my old my CSS file. Confirms. All right, so then the old my.js file. Double click that one. And then in the scripts folder, we have index.js. And this one we have to be a little bit smarter about it because some of the code is already there. So in the old my.js file, I wouldn't really just copy the whole thing and paste it. I would not do that because there's already stuff in the index.js. There's already the immediately invoked function. There's already useStrict. In the old file, we've got useStrict, we've got ready to rock, and then we've got all of our extra code. So I think what we need is starting, I suppose if you want to take that comment, line 6, all the way down to line 142. So basically everything inside of the function after useStrict, after ready to go. So I'm about lines 6 to 142. I'm going to copy that. And in our project here, every code that we're going to write basically is in on-device ready. So it looks like I've got a spot on line 22 after the splash screen hides, ready to rock. We've got a spot there that you can paste. So paste your code there. So I'm going to paste all my 140 whatever lines of code before the end of on-device ready. So I made a comment there to note to myself that that curly brace is the on-device ready. So make sure in the on-device ready function you copy and paste all of your JavaScript code. All of that comes in. I can close the my.js file and I can delete it. If you've confirmed that you've copied the JavaScript code from last month into this month, index.js, you can delete my.js.js. and then I'll save the JS file. So pausing to take a step here. We copied the old CSS code into the project. We copied the old JavaScript code into the right spot. We're gonna do something like that for the old index HTML code into the new project. That index HTML is index from last month. Index 2 is the correct one that I want to keep. So I'm going to open index from last month, index HTML, and open index 2 from this month. So from the old project from last month, I've got a total of 187 lines. My current Visual Studio version only has 24. Let's see, so we need to so I see title in both. The meta viewport, I see it in both. Okay, this meta car set, I don't see it in my Visual Studio version. There's a different version of it over on line 10. Content type, text, HTML. Okay, those might be equivalent. I guess it doesn't hurt. What I'm going to do is copy then from the index, from the old index file. I'm going to copy that car set, meta car set, and paste it in the same line 4 on the new index file. The old index file has a link over to my CSS. We don't need that one. But it has then links of style sheets to jQuery Mobile and my colors, which is my particular theme. So I think before we copy that code over here, just to clean up our project a little bit, we have a folder called CSS. And I think what we should put in the CSS folder is the font and the jQuery CSS file and my colors. So your font and your jQuery mobile CSS file and your My Colors CSS file, since it's all related to CSS, should be moved into the CSS folder of this project. So on the root level, I've got index, index 2, and other things. In the CSS folder, I've got my font, my custom CSS code, index CSS, jQuery Mobile, and my colors CSS. We need to reference that both of those CSS files in the index2 file, and we could copy and paste, however the paths will be wrong. Instead, what I want to do is I want to type it manually in Visual Studio to show you a really nice thing that I like. So copying and pasting these two lines I don't think will be so good. You'll need to change your path. Here's how I would do it instead. So let's say on line,
How do you open up two windows again?
you can right-click a tab and then select at the very bottom, you've got New Vertical Tab Group. So what I want to do is add before line 16, before that CSS/index CSS file, I want to add the tag link rel. I press tab and it filled it all in for me. It knows that I want an href. It knows that it's a style sheet. So the href is going to point over to the jQuery mobile file, which is in a CSS folder. So another cool thing that Visual Studio does is as you start typing, it sees you have a folder in your project, CSS. You can double-click that. And then it sees in that folder you've got these CSS files. And you can double-click that. It types it for you. Next line, I need another link. That is going to be href. And again, it'll pop up for you to actually select files. So the next item that I needed in there in the CSS file was the my colors. That is a rel style sheet. So like on the index file from last month, I've got a reference to the jQuery file first. Then I've got my my custom theme from Theme Roller. And then I've got my custom CSS file for every other tweak in that order. Because I want to load up the basic jQuery styles, then change the color, and then tweaks to override it. Everything in body, I'll get back to that in a moment, but if we go all the way to the end of your old index file, at the very end of the old index file, there's a link script over to jQuery, and there's a link over to jQuery mobile, and there's a link to your custom JavaScript. At the end of our Visual Studio index file, we've got links to Cordova, platform overrides, and then custom code. So we'll add jQuery and jQuery mobile before Cordova, and then we don't need the rest. That is, we don't need that my.js. So here again, copying and pasting might work, but if you type it manually, you get the you get the code hinting. So script, I'm going to skip the type. Then we need source. You can use your arrow keys here also. Once you get that pop-up to do a little folder navigation, you can do the arrow keys. Oops, but before that. So if we put all our CSS files in the CSS folder, we should put our JavaScript files in the scripts folder. So jQuery mobile JS and jQuery mobile map and jQuery, those three JavaScript files in the Explorer should be in scripts. So my scripts folder now has all my script files, all my JavaScript files. So when I write my path, right here, source equals quotes, it will see a scripts folder. Inside of scripts, first we'll load jQuery 211. Next I need a script reference to jQuery mobile JS. What was already there was Cordova, then the platform overrides, so custom JavaScript for each platform, each operating system, and then the custom JavaScript, which we copied from the old JavaScript file to this JavaScript file. these old references from the template, they work, and they actually have a little bit of extra superfluous code here. Our project ultimately behind the scenes is an HTML5 project, and therefore it assumes and it understands any JavaScript. Anything in the script tag is JavaScript. If you'd like to clean this up a little bit, you could remove the type JavaScript. Type text JavaScript used to be for older browsers that didn't know which version. Are you talking about JavaScript or ASP script or whatever other script? I personally understand that to be superfluous, so if you would like, you can remove those references to the type, because HTML5 assumes JavaScript. You can leave them as is and they'll work, but I'm going to take them out just so that it looks nicer. And you have the same thing happening up on the style sheet file. HTML5 assumes that when you've got link and when you've got a rel of style sheet, well, you don't have to have type text CSS. You can clean that up if you want. So we have the supporting files, the CSS files, JavaScript files. Then in the middle body, that's where we're going to take those other hundreds of lines of code from the index file and copy and paste from the old index to this new index. So this is going to be from line 12 all the way down, in my case to 182, right before all of those JavaScript files. Paste. So now the original Visual Studio index HTML has all of my jQuery mobile code, references to those style sheets, to the JavaScript, to the jQuery, jQuery mobile. I'm going to save that index to, close both index files. Since I copied the code of HTML from last month into this month's file, I can delete the old index file and rename this one back to index. Here, obviously, be careful depending how you named these. Be careful you're deleting the right one. And so the old index file, if you want to double check it, you can open it. That old index file, okay, that's the old one. I'm going to delete the old index file, and the index file from this Visual Studio project, we name it index. Because inside of the config XML, it's looking for a starting file, index.html.
Before we delete these, I mean, you've gone pretty fast, and if you had any glitches, you wouldn't be keeping up with what you're doing. So if people start deleting their original files, then they're not going to have them. So go back to the flash drive.
They'd have to go back to the flash drive or back to the network folder to get the original files.
So you want to keep your own, right? You want to go back to the flash drive. So
Yes.
is there a way we can run this first before we start deleting the old files and make sure it works?
Not really, because the whole point of doing this transfer over is because we're trying to transfer last month's project to this month. Running it without completing this operation will most likely still give you the basic template.
I'm just saying leave the files that you named it index 1, for example.
Uh-huh.
You have to rename that one index, but you can leave the old files in there. It's not referencing my JS, it's not referencing my CSS, etc. Before we delete them and then find out we didn't copy over correctly.
That would be a little bit safer, definitely. I like to fly by the seat of my pants, so. But that's a good point. If this is a little tricky, that's why we'll pause to check people's code. But yeah, we are copying files over, and if it doesn't work, you might have to go to back to a previous version. Then after this copy's over, after copying this over, then I'll try to run it, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to run it on my device and see what happens. So because I'm copying a whole bunch of new code over and a whole bunch of supporting files when I run this, this will probably take a moment and it'll make my project even larger because I have a lot more stuff.
You put your fonts in the CSS folder?
I put them in the CSS folder because the code in the CSS file is referencing the font files in the same level folder.
In my CSS folder?
Yours work, Mike?
Well, it doesn't look as good as his, but I'm just in my console, there's a lot of error messages, but I mean, I can see it.
Okay, we're getting there. Let me check if mine works, and then we'll.
I'm not gonna make any money on the cat market with this.
Just needs a few more tweaks. It just needs a few more tweaks. So a couple of days ago I was saying, in theory, you could almost just drag and drop a project into the Visual Studio file. But we had to do all of these loose ends because we had started a project last month outside of Visual Studio and then trying to integrate it into here. So if we had started from the beginning, Visual Studio all the way, this step would be superfluous. But I'm showing here that we have the ability to take any sort of web project that exists and integrate it into this, and there's some loose ends that we have to deal with, but conceptually I think makes sense, right? We ultimately need an index file, CSS folder, scripts folder, so it's all about taking your old code and putting it into the right place. HTML code goes in the HTML folder, JavaScript code goes in the JavaScript folder, and CSS code in the CSS folder. So when mine loads up, we can confirm if it worked on mine. Oh, here it is. It loaded up right there. So I do see the last month's CVDB project. I'm going to try to log in and stuff in a moment, but I have my JavaScript console here. I'm going to take a look at mine too. I am going to see that, okay, that says ajaxloader.gif. Not found. Okay, we'll see what that one does in a moment. I want to try to sign in here, so I will click the button sign up, and I'm going to create an account. So as I've been using my app, it has been giving output. It is doing that console output that I would see on Chrome from last month.
I'm gonna get the clickers. Still finding.
Now also, so I've got it installed on my device. If I load up the project, I've got the splash screen for a moment, and then it automatically detected I was logged in, and it did flip the screen to have me logged in. So that code about automatic login that didn't quite work at the end of last month, it should work now, because I don't know, there's some glitch or something from last month. But now when it's in here, it is logging me in. It automatically knows I've logged in.